If I did not do that, it would...
we'd end up with
car crash.
like this.
It would be right now. I can't speak without notes. Every conversation I have is noted.
It's written on the inside of your eyelids.
Hello, you are listening to Off Radar with me, James Smith.
Me, Neil Brock.
And me, James Etok.
It's a movie podcast.
We can do characters that fly and shoot laser beams and do woo.
Beneath all of that, it's all about friendship.
Playing the drums until his hands are bleeding.
Each week, one of us picks a movie that all three of us either haven't seen in many years or in some cases haven't seen at all.
We each head off and watch the chosen movie, return to the microphone, then waffle about it for your listening pleasure.
Furthermore, if you want to join in and suggest a movie for us to watch, why not tweet us at Off-Radar Podcast or email us on offradarpod@gmail.com.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, share and review. It really helps getting the pod out there. For now, strap in, turn the volume up and let's go Off Radar.
I think you need to turn off Etok's camera already.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Off Radar. Very special episode today. It is our Halloween special, part one of our Halloween special. I'm James Smith. I am joined by James Etok.
Howdy.
And Neil Brock.
Hello.
Oh my God.
Straight away.
It was so freaky. Who we call Nige, by the way.
I'm scared.
So before we get into this one, do you guys have any plans for Halloween, or are you going to turn the lights off and hide from the trick-or-treaters like me?
Oh, I was going to go out and egg some houses and...
Do you normally celebrate Halloween, though? I
love Halloween. Every year, I would like to say me and my wife enjoy a bunch of Halloween films, but essentially I pick an entire weekend's worth of films, and we have to try and get through at least 3 a day. And I just sort of sit her down in front of the TV and say, "This is what we're watching," whether she likes it or not. So, yeah, pretty much. But yeah, and just watch loads of Halloween films. And I remember one year we went to this kind of spooky church that they had actually put a screening on. So we got to see a horror film in a spooky venue and stuff like that. So any kind of opportunity to do a cool Halloween thing, I'm all over it. I love Halloween.
Man, watching in a scary church, that sounds terrifying. What was the film?
It was Spice Girls the movie.
Hey.
No, it wasn't really. It was Shaun of the Dead, actually.
Oh, okay. All right, fine. How about you, Etok?
You asked a question do you ever celebrate Halloween? Not really, because it was always more of an American holiday, I always found. Yeah. So I never really got into it. But I'd say over the last maybe 5 or 6 years, one of my friends has her birthday. Who's appeared on this podcast? Marianne has her birthday around about Halloween. So this year we're all going to go to Ultimate Power. If any of you guys have been to that before, it's the big 1980s. You go to the O2, not the Forum. The O2 Forum, as it used to be called, in Kentish Town, and you dress up in horrible costumes and dance to 80s ballads and music and a few 90s
awesome.
things. It's great. I mean, a little bit apprehensive given the world situation, but it's a lot of fun. How about yourself, Smith? Aside from turning your lights off and
yeah, to be honest, I've because it's over here in the UK, it when we were growing up, it wasn't that big really. So I remember going trick or treating as a kid, but as an adult, you go to the odd kind of tongue-in-cheek Halloween party, but I've never really kind of thought about it. Apart from, I do love watching the odd horror film, and especially around this time of the year, there's a lot of new films come out, but there's also quite a lot on TV and Netflix and stuff. So
Saw 14,
Yes. Oh, that old chestnut.
Yeah. Well, also thank you guys for writing in and letting us know a few things. I'm going to read out a couple. So Ross Gold wrote in, and so he's written, "My favourite character is always Freddy Krueger, and Wes Craven probably is my director. So Nightmare on Elm Street is for me. Love how fear-inducing it is. As sleep is fundamental for humans, so in fact you're fighting yourself and your human nature to stay awake, and inevitably are falling asleep into Krueger's world."
Just tell me who did it. I'll go get him, baby.
Fred Krueger did it, Daddy. And only I can get him. It's my nightmare he comes to. Just come here and break the door down in exactly 20 minutes. Can you do that?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, Nightmare on Elm Street for me, it's an absolute classic, and I love that first film. It's got kind of everything you want from a horror movie, and like they made so many more after it. But yeah, what a classic film.
Well, I think at this point you need to put in the 1-2 Freddy's Coming for You rhyme, because it's amazing. That was one of the first sort of full-on horror films I ever saw, and I was far too young to have watched it. I blame my older brother Dave for like having it on, and I sort of came downstairs and I'm like, oh, what's this? And they're like, oh, come join us, watch this film. And I must have been about 11 or 12 or something, and I swear for the next like 2 months I could barely go to sleep. I had to go and like sleep in my parents' bedroom because I was so terrified, because that's the effect Freddy had. It was absolutely terrifying, like the scene in the school with the body bag and old Johnny Depp getting pulled into his bed and all that kind of stuff, and the blood exploding on the ceiling. There's some, and to be honest, like some of the other Freddys, like what is there, 7, 8? There's some very meta as well, like Freddy's New Nightmare and stuff.
That's the one where he's acting, isn't it? So Robert Englund is kind of acting as Freddy, which is a bit of a headfuck. But yeah, it's actually quite a good one, that one.
You know what? And I even enjoyed like Freddy versus Jason when that eventually came out. I got to see that with a bunch of mates at the cinema. We sat in like those big, super comfy, almost like sofa chairs right at the back, popcorn, chilled out, and it was funny and enjoyable. And yeah, I love Freddy Krueger in terms of Nightmare on Elm Street. Great films.
I always thought like his design was fantastic, and the idea of invading someone's sleep is just a wonderful take on the whole horror genre, because it's just like, it's not a murderer or a person with a knife or this or that. It's actually like a guy who's in your dreams, and just the whole aesthetic of this guy.
Whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
And Ross also goes on to say on Wes Craven, he's clearly a fan, and also Scream movies. He loves it in terms of how self-aware they are, the rules of a horror movie, the franchise. Just very clever for him. It goes way beyond the standard slasher horror film, which I can find he has very little depth to it. And yeah, I totally get that. I think the thing with Scream is there were so many films around that time that kind of came after it that did exactly the same thing, so it's kind of got lost a bit in the 90s slasher movie. But that
I'd say it's like Scream was a wonderfully cynical movie in a way, but with like a wry smile, and it was heartfelt. It was like, hey, we're going to send up the horror genre in a way, but still make it scary. And then every other movie, like you say, was, hey, we can do the same thing. We can send up the horror genre. Obviously it's scary, but then it, like you say, it kind of got lost in the crowd a bit.
Like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie?
I don't know.
You have to have a favorite. What comes to mind?
Halloween. You know, the one with the guy in the white mask who walks around and stalks babysitters?
Yeah.
What's yours?
Guess.
Nightmare on Elm Street.
Is that the one where the guy had knives for fingers?
Yeah, Freddy Krueger.
Freddy, that's right. I like that movie. It was scary.
Well, the first one was, but the rest sucked.
Drew Barrymore at the start. That was iconic. It was fantastic. Like, and all the people that were kind of in it were sort of like the Nev Campbells, the Courtney Cox, had come off of like being big sort of TV stars and States Party of Five and Friends, and kind of made that breakthrough. And yeah, it was a shame actually. Like with David Arquette especially, like he essentially he had quite a good indie career going on at the time. Was in Scream, and if anything, it kind of ruined his career because he was just seen as this like bumbling idiot. He was seen as Dewey in everything else he did, and he couldn't really ever shake away from that part. But yeah, it's a really, really, really good film. But you're right, it's kind of, I think it's lost in a lot of people's consciousness in terms of, aside from the Scream masks, which themselves have come quite iconic. The film itself, and I think partly that's down to the kind of slightly substandard sequels. I mean, the second one's pretty good, but beyond that,
I can't remember.
I would say you'd be struggling.
That's right.
Well, that's the thing. You can't really remember him that well. I remember Sarah Michelle Gellar being in the second one, but that's about it.
Yeah, it's basically the same thing, isn't it? They just kind of repeat it. And then I think the fact they did like Scary Movie, which is a piss take of a piss take. It's like, it kind of got lost.
Listen, asshole!
No, you listen, you little bitch. You hang up on me again, I'll gut you like a fish, understand? Yeah.
kind of joke?
More of a game, really. Can you handle that? Blondie.
And then Mark John, who owns Funky Cinema in Aylesbury, he's written a really well-written bit about The Exorcist. He loves The Exorcist because the symbolism is so powerful and timeless. All of us wrestle with our own inner demons, and when a film really catches the public imagination, it strikes a chord deeper than we might imagine, reaching into our own psychological darkness and hinting at the monsters within our own mind. And just to shout out that is showing at the Funky Cinema on October the 30th, so be sure to go along if you're in the Aylesbury area. I mean, The Exorcist.
What a film to go and see.
This is groundbreaking. It was banned in this country for many years, and as a kid I remember, at 15, 16 trying to get hold to see it, because I think even at that point it was still banned in this country. But it's such an iconic and scary and horrifying film that set a standard for so many horror movies.
One of the few horror films that literally made the hair stand up on the back of my neck, like really did that to me. I could feel them there. And as you said, when we were growing up, it was banned, and eventually finally getting on VHS. I remember us being so excited around my mate's house. We all sort of gathered around to watch it, and we were kind of like a jokey, laughy sort of group, but watching that was total respect, like silence, just like everyone transfixed to the screen watching The Exorcist. Absolute classic.
I think we've got a guest.
You're gonna die up there.
Again? Oh my God, honey.
Its tone and its mood, it just felt, it hasn't got like big flashy numbers or anything. It's just it feels very isolated. That house in itself almost feels like a character. It's just one place. I don't know if I'm making much sense, but it's just the tone of it and everything. It's not, just something inherently evil about that movie, I guess, they managed to get that across with very little. There's the obvious stuff like, the spinning head and the walking down the stairs backwards and all this business, but there's still so much, like as your reviewer said, kind of like on a psychological thing, I think is really kind of striking about it.
There's a legend around it as well, in the sense of, I remember like some members of the cast died,
yeah, that's
and some
right,
members of the crew, and all these sort of bad things were happening around it. It's almost as if to say, you should not be making this film. You are dealing in things you do not understand. So it's really terrifying in that regard.
What is it? What's happening?
Stop! It's burning! It's burning!
Do something, Doctor. Please help her.
Please, Mother! We'll make it stop! He's trying to kill me! Mother! Make it...
All right, let's see what to do.
Keep away! This hour's mine.
And then on the other side of the coin, now I quite like that someone's written this. So Meryl Westlake has written in and said, I don't like them. Tiny children, ghosts, and then a little crossy emoji. I don't like to be scared. Who wants to be afraid? Well, that is a cracking point, because we watch horror films to feel fear. We know we're going to get scared by them. But why? Why do we watch them? And why do you guys watch them?
To feel alive. Like, it's like going on a roller coaster, to give you that buzz, to give you that adrenaline, to sort of make you appreciate what you've kind of got and what situation you're in, and make you jump, and all the wonderful things that come with a good old scary movie.
I was going to say, I'm kind of on her page, to be honest, or same thought. I understand why people watch horror films, but one of the reasons I watch them is like remember when like The Ring and all those films came out, I saw the odd clip here and there. It's like, there's no way I want to watch this. This looks like awful. I remember I saw a few clips of the original Ring, and there was times I'd be laying in bed thinking like, oh my God, and I would have dreams and stuff, and I didn't even see the entire movie, but just certain things. I was like, I don't need to feel that. I remember when I was working at a certain DVD corporate production house, and I had to watch this horror film, and I was like, I don't want to watch it. So I gave it to one of my colleagues to watch instead. It was I believe it was like a J horror. Is it called Shutter?
Shutter. I remember that. With
there we
violins.
go. Yeah. And I was just like, I ain't watching that. And I gave it to I believe our esteemed colleague Mark Batt. So yeah, I was just like, I ain't watching that.
I had a friend as well who suggested a film just to talk about that he really recommended, and he basically sold it to me this way. This is from Tom Clark, and he said to me, basically, this is a horror film that has Dracula, the Mummy, Wolfman, Frankenstein's monster, the creature from the Black Lagoon. It's kind of got all these superstars of horror.
Did we go
see Monster Squad?
Yeah,
because it's a 1980s horror film where Wolfman has got nards. So if you've never watched the Monster Squad, it is scary, but it's bloody funny as well. And it's like a Goonies with horror characters in. So
yeah, very. We saw that at the Prince Charles. Nige was like, "You got to go and see it." I went to the Prince Charles to see it, and I got a friend online who actually is obsessed with that movie, and he's got like every VHS from around the world, laser discs, anything. He's just collected everything to do with Monster Squad. But yeah, my entryway into Monster Squad was Nige going, "Let's go and see it at the Prince Charles." I was like, "Okay," and then I was just like, "Oh, that was such a fun movie," and like that description is amazing, like very much like Goonies with monsters or more monsters.
And get the hell out of here.
Kick him in the nose! Kick him in the nose! He doesn't have nose! Do it! Wolfman's got nards! Come on!
So when we went to the Prince Charles to see Monster Squad, the actual other film on the double bill was They Live. So Mr. James Smith, I hear you want to talk about They Live.
Yeah, absolutely. So there we go. So the first film on this 3-part special is They Live. For me, like, I hadn't seen this before. Had you guys obviously saw it together at the cinema, which is fantastic. So it came out in 1988. It was written and directed by John Carpenter. And I guess if you haven't seen They Live or watched much John Carpenter, then you'll probably know him from The Thing and Halloween, I guess his biggest ones. But also, Nige pointed us in the way of watching a couple of his other films, which I've watched since our 80s podcast episode, which was Prince of Darkness and Mouth of Madness.
In the Mouth of Madness,
and I'd say these three are all kind of fall into this very similar kind of little mini genre. And it stars Roddy Piper, who...
Rowdy Roddy Piper.
I wrote
Rowdy Roddy Piper.
We're both getting rowdy trying to correct you.
Yeah, Rowdy Roddy Piper.
Rowdy Robbie Piper.
Robbie Cooper.
Robbie Williams. And he was a professional wrestler, which, if you didn't know that and you watch the film, will make sense. It's got Keith David in, who's been in quite
amazing.
A lot of films.
Oh,
he's in The Thing.
Yeah, The Thing.
He is in The Thing.
Actor.
And Meg Foster, who... no idea who she was.
What?
Craziest eyes in Hollywood.
Oh, I met her in real life. She was Evil Lynn in the Masters of the Universe movie, the live action movie, and she came along to one of the He-Man conventions. I think it may be 2012 or 2013, and I met her. And in real life, her eyes are. She's older, obviously now, but her eyes are just. They're the most amazing things, and we were talking. Me and my friend Lee were just talking with her just about your eyes, and she's like, yeah. She was like really down to earth, kind of in that weird, slightly out there, kooky way. But yeah, what a truly like lovely woman, but someone as well who didn't really feature in many movies.
No. Well, there you go, and the film itself. So it starts with what's his name in the film?
Yeah, but that's the thing. He doesn't actually have a name, so to speak. I think it's the Spanish name
Nada
for
something.
Yeah, nada, for Spanish name for nothing. So it's almost like he's a nothing character.
Wow.
So
I like that.
Because he doesn't really have, at least in the film's perspective, he doesn't really have much of a past or not necessarily much of a future. He's just kind of going
drifter.
Through life.
Yeah, he's and at the very start of the film, he's drifting into this new city. It's almost like a western, isn't it? He's got like kind of blue jeans on and a check shirt, and the music's got this chugging.
I wear blue jeans and a check shirt. Am I a cowboy?
You are, Etok. He arrives in this kind of rundown
It's a slum, is what it is, right?
Yeah. This rundown town where there's a lot of people that are homeless and kind of like trying to make the best of their lives.
It's making me hungry. It makes me want to.
Prices are so high, I take a ladder to go shopping.
Yeah, the music, I should say right from the off, actually, John Carpenter, as he often does, also composed the music.
It's so good when he does. Like, he did a CD quite recently, like an anthology of all his music from his films, and it is absolutely incredible. So if you've not had a chance, I recommend checking that out.
That's awesome. And like straight away, like one of the films myself and Etok worked on when we worked together was Assault on Precinct 13.
Oh, it was, yeah. I forgot about
that. And this actually had a few similarities, you know, maybe with that kind of bassiness of at the start of this film, but with these kind of almost like Western kind of
like
80s twangs added in.
Bit of synth action.
The synth was great. Yeah, really. I think the opening of that film really kind of sets the tone. The music is perfect. The shots are really, the establishing shots of this drifter are just so good. It just kind of sets the mood for the rest of the movie, I think, or at least in terms of a certain aspect of the movie, you know, against what the twist is and everything. Yeah.
They have created a repressive society, and we are their unwitting accomplices. Their intention to rule rests with the annihilation of consciousness. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain.
Well, first of all, he goes and works on like a building site, doesn't he, to begin with, and it's all very masculine and very...
with Roddy Piper, it's always going to be. He's got the guns, hasn't he? He's in great shape in this film.
Can I just make one comment about when Roddy Piper's got his shirt off and he's doing, I think he's just digging, right? Yeah. I got to say, and Nige will know this because we're both like big wrestling fans, especially like 80s and 90s wrestling. I would say Roddy Piper looks better here in this film than he ever did in his wrestling career.
It's really funny you say that, because when they were doing the publicity for the film afterwards, obviously they do like the press bits where Roddy Piper and John Carpenter were going round. Some people thought that John Carpenter had made Roddy Piper look more muscular through like digital technology in a time when that wasn't really a thing. It's like the 80s, and they'd like done it somehow. And he was like, it's ridiculous. He was just ripped. It's just, if you put Piper next to someone like Hogan was huge. Yeah. Piper was just in incredibly good shape and bulky. But when you're up against someone who's like 350 pounds and Piper was probably like 230, there's a huge difference.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. Once he kind of gets kind of integrated into this little building site community, anyway, he very randomly discovers a box, and in this box are these big black sunglasses, and he puts a pair on, as you would,
because he wants to look cool, because he's Roddy Piper in the 80s.
It's the 80s. You always, you see shades, you put them on.
But, yeah, they look like, you know, the kind of sunglasses, if you go to the IMAX and you watch a 3D film, they're like those kind of sunglasses. They don't look very cool,
but they did in the 80s. Let's just keep stressing that.
And I would love a pair. If anyone's got a pair they want to send me, listening in on this pod, by all means.
There you go. And
I want some free stuff with Roddy Piper. No way. Carry on.
And the first things he sees, he puts them on, and he sees like so there's like big kind of advertising billboards with like, I don't know, like a Caribbean cruise or Coke or whatever it is, and he sees these very surreal, big, bold messages. So I wrote a couple down. So the first one, it was marry and reproduce, I think is the first one he sees, or obey. And then there's like consume, and then stay asleep, or, you know, like basically all these very incredibly bold kind of consumer capitalist kind of messaging.
Well, commands, basically.
That's the word.
Yeah. And it goes black and white when he puts them on as well, doesn't it? It goes from colour to black and white. And you said about the Obey, and the Obey has kind of become a brand now, hasn't it? And a lot of people don't even know that sort of comes from They Live originally.
I didn't,
as well.
You know, I've only just seen this film, and I've seen like a friend of ours, Fairless, with an Obey t-shirt, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And then watching this film, I'm like, that's where this comes from. Yeah. And then even like the kind of, you know, the kind of messages like that have come from this, and even like with conspiracy theories, like, David Icke and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, there's
yeah.
definitely, like, with a few of John Carpenter's films, like this kind of messaging, people have definitely jumped on that and turned it not just into, a capitalist consumerism, all of that kind of stuff, which I think is what Carpenter says he wanted to portray out of this film, like that we're being bombarded with messaging and being controlled and fear, which is all very true. But like, I think
the conspiracy theorists take it in a real direction. Carpenter was almost doing like a metaphor of like, this is pretty. When you're looking at a sign that says Coca-Cola and you used to go, I fancy a Coke, you're buying into that whole thing. And don't get me wrong, I love a good can of Coke, but it's that thing of, and now you obviously get people watch that movie and go, oh, there are secret signs and the lizard people, and
which is obviously the next point where he puts the glasses on. He's at a newspaper stand, looking at all these, messages in a like a magazine, and he looks up and sees this kind of skeleton. It looks like a skeleton to begin with. That's what my impression was, but actually, it's basically an alien, really, that have kind of managed to live within society, disguise themselves, and then manage to control the human race through, like, all of the, through TV, through media.
I said, what's your problem?
I guess nowadays, like, it's ironic, really, that we're living in a world full of, like, social media and, like, targeted AI advertising. And in the 80s, like, less so, but even then it was so. It
was what this movie was showing, like, a sign of things to come and how easy it is to, because I guess in a way those creatures, the aliens as it were, are just those individuals that are powerful enough to control the media, the news outlets that are, advertising that kind of thing. It's almost like a metaphor in that sense as well. It doesn't have to be an alien. It could just be the guy who runs Amazon. And by me saying Amazon now, probably listeners of this podcast have, somehow got a bunch of orders pop up in their, on their phone or something. It's nuts.
This is a hugely political film, and it was made sort of bang in the middle of Reaganism in the States, which was all about capitalism and buy more, have more, all that kind of stuff. And as you've said, all those kind of subliminal messages that pop up. But I think what's quite interesting is you mentioned about kind of like the aliens. You said they kind of look like skeletons or like rotting corpses, and that's what kind of Carpenter wanted to get across by their design. The fact these are like, they're supposed to be almost like human, but they're the rotten humans, those that kind of tread on us, those that keep us down. And like you said at the start as well, when Piper's kind of drifting in, everyone's kind of losing their jobs. There's loads of unemployment. I think Piper gets laid off from his construction job, even though he's working really hard, doing all those things that are supposed to be the American dream. You work really hard, you get your rewards, you rise to the top. Piper works really hard, he's unemployed. You should be able to live to the American dream. Working hard and doing everything right, you should be rewarded for it. But no, it's about the people that tread on you and that constantly hold you down. And I think They Live is a big reaction from John Carpenter against that.
Absolutely. So he really wants to convince. Now, this is one of the most bizarre moments in the film. You know what I'm going to talk about. So
me and Nige,
straight away.
He wants to. So anyone who maybe hasn't seen it yet, he wants to convince Frank, who is played by Keith David, to put the glasses on, and that is basically how they get into a massive fight. And it just comes out of nowhere. And for me, this was almost like an excuse for them to basically oil Roddy up and have a fight sequence. I think there's even like a backbreaker in there. And
that was a suplex. There's definitely a
suplex.
There's a line which I wrote down, and he says, either put on these glasses or start eating the trash can. And it's like, what the hell is going on now?
I'd never seen it. Me and I just sitting there in the Prince Charles cinema in London. So we're with a room full of people that love this movie or that are into those kind of movies. And I wasn't expecting that scene. Obviously, Nigel's seen it before. And the room was laughing because I think it's supposed to be a funny scene. It's an absurd scene. It's like the scene in Predator when they all just go, hey, what's that over there? Let's all just start blowing the crap out of the forest. Again, a film we saw at the Prince Charles where the room is just laughing because it's just absurd. And I think this fight scene it's just for a guy to put on a pair of shades. It's just like, wear the shades. And they get into, and this fight goes on, but it is, I looked it up afterwards. I was like, how long? And I wrote it down. It is apparently like the longest kind of fight scene in like, I guess, Hollywood movie history. Because it just two guys, and it's not explosive or martial arts or anything. It's just two guys beating the pants out of each other.
Having a good old-fashioned punch-up with a few...
a humdinger.
Yeah, wrestling moves by some trash cans.
It's so good.
And they're knackered as well. You can tell they're knackered. Because originally in the script, it was only supposed to be 15 seconds. Like, quick fight, put on the glasses. But Keith David and Roddy Piper, like, they obviously met up off set, they discussed it, and they decided to choreograph this... I say ridiculous, wonderful, fantastic, unbelievable, whatever you want to call it, fight. And they showed John Carpenter, and John Carpenter was like, you've got to do it, And the fight they did, everything except punches to face and like knees to groin is full contact. They're actually like hitting and pummeling each other. It's only those two bits, obviously you can't punch a star in the face, and nobody's kicking Roddy Piper in the balls. But yeah, and they left it in, and it is bizarre. It's something like, even if you don't find the time to watch this film, go and watch this clip
on YouTube.
It's just, it goes down in like Hollywood cinema folklore.
It is. It's kind of gathered this rolling ball of cultness, this film in general, but especially this scene. And the first thing I was chatting to a friend in a pub, and I said, we're going to review They Live, and the first thing he says is, that fight. And it's like, we're talking about a horror film here, and the first thing he's talking about is a fight scene. I mean, that's how much of an impact that this kind of ridiculousness has made. But then what follows after is, he obviously puts the glasses on, they become friends, it's all very obvious that that's going to happen, and they kind of like, they find and join almost like a little rebellion, I would say.
Yeah, resistance, I would say.
Resistance, rebellion, which is, like, again, like a little nod to like people kind of standing up to the system and that kind of thing. But very quickly in this film, Rowdy Roddy Piper's character, he gets figured out by them, whoever they are, the aliens, like quite early on, which I really enjoyed the build of him figuring out, and I almost wanted that to go on for longer. Do you know what I mean? Like,
but the scenes where he does like figure things out are great, like the newspaper stand, the there's one bit when he's watching the TV and it's like some like politician, and he just goes like, it figures it would be something like this. But the thing that always makes me laugh, there's obviously the famous line I'll do in a second, but the thing that makes me laugh is where he's in the supermarket, and he just says like, he's like, and he goes, you've got a face like, I don't know, melted cheese or something like that, and then he turns to some other woman, he goes, you're okay. He goes, this one, real fucking ugly.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
It's such a good line.
You're okay. This one, real fucking ugly. Oh. You see, I take these glasses off, she looks like a regular person, doesn't she, huh? Put them back on, formaldehyde face. That's what we got.
That's enough out of you.
And obviously then the next minute he goes into a bank and he's all gunned up because he has to fight with some cops who are also, we've got one, they've got their wristwatches, we got one. He knows who we are. He takes their guns and then goes into, the bank, and he does the famous, which is the line that is probably more famous than the film has been. I'd love to look up, I should have done it actually, how many times the line has been used. It's I've come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum. It's been, I've seen it used in cartoons, other movies. It's almost like transcended the film as much as the fight scene.
And apparently I was reading just before this, I was actually watching John Carpenter, a few interviews, that it wasn't written Roddy Piper actually wrote that line, and and he said to Carpenter, can I do it? And he said, let's give it a go, and they kept it in.
It's a great line. It's such a great line,
and like you say, it's big. It's as big as the film.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum.
Piper had like a notebook filled with all these kind of like wrestling quotes and things that he wanted to put into promos and stuff, and that was one. And he said it to John Carpenter, and Carpenter, as you said, Smith, he let him put it in, and he later did actually perform it in professional wrestling.
Really?
But sort of just talking briefly about professional wrestling, like those of you who know wrestling will know that WWF in the 1980s was all about a guy called Vince McMahon who ran WWF. And he did not want Roddy Piper to do this film at all. He desperately tried to talk him out of it. He said, look, give me 4 weeks, I'll find you a film that pays you just as much that you can do. Don't do this film. And Piper actually had to quit the WWF to go and do this film. He quit, And this film, when it came out, was like a #1 hit in America and basically raised his profile so much more that he had extremely good negotiating terms when he eventually did return back to the WWF. But and it kind of made Piper's reputation in wrestling. He was always known as like a decent wrestler who was pretty good on the mic, but this kind of took him to a different level. And WrestleMania, John Carpenter first saw him at WrestleMania when he like tag teamed with Mr. T. Again, that kind of showbiz side to him. But
I just want to clarify.
Back to go on.
Tag team against Mr. T. He had the boxing match with Mr. T as well. It was Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff versus Hulk Hogan and Mr. T, and then they had the match.
Oh, that's right. Yes,
and then the boxing match was the following year, where they had like a shoot boxing match where it was Mr. T versus Roddy Piper. And Nige, going back to your earlier point about how big people look, when you see Roddy Piper next to Mr. T, Roddy Piper looks like a monster. So even, that's the crazy thing. Like, as in,
think about Mr. T. He looks insane.
You think of Mr. T in the 80s, like a Billy the Fool, when he's huge, but he looks compared to when you see him compared to in the ring with Roddy Piper. It's like, oh, so yeah, Smith and people listening, check out the WrestleManias with Roddy Piper and just Roddy Piper in wrestling in general, especially his promos. There's one promo that's been kind of banned these days for maybe some outdated terms and stuff, but wrestling was all a big performance, and certain things have dated. But yeah, Roddy Piper in wrestling, as Nige kind of brought up wisely, it's one of the greatest things. He's so charismatic, so good and captivating.
And one thing, just to touch on Mr. T and the Rocky films as well, you might want to go back to one of the earlier podcasts we recorded on Off Radar. James Smith, James Etalk, did a wonderful Rocky podcast, which is very big in Brazil and a lot of other places as well. So please do check that out, because it's really definitely worth a listen.
Oh, thank you. Nicely said. Yes. Well, it's interesting. We're talking about a wrestler playing, in a film like this, and
well, he was one of the first as well. Like since then, The Rock, John Cena, Hogan during the 80s as well. After Piper's success, he really was the trailblazer. After him, a lot of them thought, "Wait a minute, this is a viable career opportunity."
And let's be honest,
follow in his footsteps.
Not as many were in like iconic films. Hulk Hogan's movie career is bloody awful.
Oh yeah, Mr. Nanny.
Mr. Nanny, no holds barred. Suburban Commando.
Even Roddy Piper said after this, like he said many years later, I think, sort of, sad to say that Roddy Piper's now passed away, but before he did, he actually said, like, I was essentially the trailblazer. A lot of these people in wrestling have made a lot of films, but you'll struggle to find any that have done a film as good as they live. And
it's true.
He stood by that opinion, and a lot of people agreed with him, especially John Carpenter, who thought he was great, because when he originally wrote They Live, he wanted Kurt Russell in the lead, but realised, I've done like 4 films in a row with Kurt Russell. I want a big guy, and said, sorry, I'm on WrestleMania, and the rest is history. So.
Damn, that's awesome.
And yeah, the film as a whole, I mean, I guess, like, I probably don't need to summarise too much here, because it's basically him almost trying to bring down the system. Oh yeah, I keep saying the system because the messaging is so well done that is exactly how it feels. Whereas really, in the film, it's bringing down these aliens that have taken over.
But it's not just the aliens, is it? They convince the humans as well to like sell out their own race. Yeah. And it's kind of very similar to what we see now, in the sense of the political side of people just kind of getting their minds warped, or sort of their opinions turned by the masses. I mean, we've seen it a lot in the States with certain elections and followers of certain people and all that kind of stuff. And it's exactly the same here. It's like tread on your sort of fellow human to get to the top. And
I'm sorry, but we've seen it like in something we're all, I mean, I don't know if we all still enjoy it. I know Nige isn't a big fan of his own team, but the Premier League is an example of something that sold out years ago. It's like, all this big money we can make, and it's $1 billion franchise. that was originally the people's game, but is now like, hey, make sure you go on Sky Bet and all these different things that we advertise in between programs. I dread to think how much it costs to put an advert at half time in a game. So obviously the famous one is in America, you've got the Super Bowl. But in a Premier League game, I can imagine those spots where you put adverts in between the two halves of a match must be extortionate, the rates they go for. And it is. It's about consumerism. It's that whole thing. It's your team going, oh, like Barcelona, for instance, we're never going to have a shirt sponsor. Oh, some Arab country are going to pay us loads of money. Here it is. You know, it's constant stuff like that. And, you know, unfortunately, I think that is the world we live in. And it was nothing new back then, but it was what Carpenter was doing was saying, look, it is coming, and this is the reality. This is the metaphor. But yeah, I think
that's
it's
right.
fascinating.
And at the time it was made, there was no internet. There was no way of voicing a different opinion in the same way, rather than chatting to someone down the pub. Whereas now we get bombarded with, you know, left, right, some very far out, you know, hence the conspiracy theories and stuff like that. So it's kind of almost sometimes too much information in every way, and you don't know what to believe. And that is exactly the point in this film. Carpenter wants you to question the reality that you are living in, and to the point where he's gone to an extreme. But, you know, it's a very, very clever tool in what comes across as, at times, a silly 80s film.
Yeah. No, I'll agree with that.
We don't need pessimism. There are no limits.
It figures it would be something like this.
As the film continues, I think one other point I was going to kind of bring up was we get to like the end, and typically, I've spoke about it a few times on this podcast, we end up on a rooftop. We love a rooftop ending, and you think there's going to be a big kind of shootout, and I guess this is a spoiler, so, you know, go away, watch it, and you basically see this big satellite dish, which is basically how they're kind of disguising themselves. So it's not just the messaging on TV, but it's also like how they're disguised as these beings. And I love that the final words that he says, which again, like for someone who hadn't seen it before, didn't know much about this film, probably didn't even know it existed 2 years ago. And he just says, "Fuck it." Blows up the dish. He basically self-sacrifices himself, I think.
Yeah, and Keith David gets it really brutally just beforehand, because it's Meg Foster that screws him and shoots him in the back of the head, because she like convinces them that I can sort of help you go to where you need to go to take him out, and then it's brutal. And then Piper takes her out on the roof because he's a badass, and then, as you said, that line was in the script. Fuck it. Boom.
And then, but what I loved about this was it was quite unexpected, like this type of ending. Like, I didn't expect them to
incredibly bleak, isn't it? Like,
to just expose it, but then what's next? And that's the brilliance of, like,
that's the brilliance of
it.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't end with them being defeated. It ends with the point where you're like, what is next? You know, it's almost like, I'm pleased that they didn't then go and make They Live 2, because, you know, there is scope.
Oh, they will. They probably will at some point.
That was
it'll just be rebooted.
It will be a reboot, and it will be with The Rock. We you know, but I'll say that on record right now.
I'd probably watch that.
I think for Carpenter, like, what he tried to show is that one person can make a difference. And whilst you're talking about the fact, like, the Premier League and all these things are so in your face, and it's like you're just another voice that no one can hear in a big crowd, you know what? One person can make a difference. And if you get two of them, you can have a 5.5 minute fight.
Yes.
And that makes the biggest difference of all. So.
But I got to say, again, another memory from the Prince Charles theatre experience was that final shot in the movie is so good, where we see, like, your obligatory topless woman in the 80s, and it's like, she appears to be having sex. And then... but it's such a great photo, and I remember again in the audience, everybody just pissed themselves laughing, because it's such a great, like, you've got this movie, you've got these end scenes, like, the aliens have been revealed, what's next? And it's just this final shot of this woman having sex. She looks down, and her boyfriend's one of the aliens, and he goes, "Hey, what's wrong, baby?" And it just cut.
It's just credits cut.
It just cuts to the credits.
Hey, what's wrong, baby?
It's so good.
So good.
He is a master of horror, and he's also a master of comedy. So.
But that's the brilliance of this movie. It is, like I say, I think it may not be heavy on the comedy, but it definitely. It's got a wry smile about it. It's like, you know, we know what we're doing here, and the film knows what it is. But I think even stuff like the 80s, The Shades, it's such an 80s thing, and you could only do that in, I think, a movie in the 80s, like The Shades that reveal everything. I just think it works so well. It's such an 80s movie, but it's iconic for, you know, it's on the surface level, it's so. Yeah, if you told like a very simple synopsis, they'd be like, oh, it sounds like a very Aliens in disguise. Oh no, that hasn't been done before. But it's the message it's sending out there and everything. And because these aliens, this is the trick. They're not attacking anybody. They're not like, they're basically, you know, being a part of the world and offering. They're basically selling out the world. And they say it's like, I just think it's such a clever movie.
Yeah. I agree. As someone who, again, like I've come to this quite late in my life, I loved the build. Like I said, that would be my only gripe, is I wanted more of the discovery. I felt like it goes into him getting found out by the woman in the supermarket quite early on, and you know, I was just really enjoying him like not being found out that he knows. So I wanted to hang on to that a bit more. But saying that, like, you know, there's so much I love about this film. The idea is amazing. The social commentary at the time that can be basically put into our lives at any point in history forevermore is a genius storytelling technique. The comedy, like, I like the comedy moments. I think sometimes it goes over the top, and you know, it probably takes you a little bit far away at times. Do you know what I mean? Like from that, like the fight scene, like as funny as it is, I'm kind of like, oh, okay, I need it to stop now. It's been 5 minutes.
You feel like you've been through a war as well. That's the thing. Yeah.
But as a whole, like, you know, like you say, Ito, it doesn't take itself seriously. So it and as it's made in the 80s at that time, I think it's in a good way, and I think because this, compared to a couple of his others, which I enjoyed, I probably enjoyed that bit more. So comparing it to like Prince of Darkness, for instance, or Mouth of Madness, I would personally put this like at the top of those kind of films. I wouldn't say it's as good as The Thing, though.
No, that's a tall order.
And would I watch this again? Yeah, definitely. So, Nige, I mean...
Hopefully at the Prince Charles one day.
Well, it sounds like, the place where we should all watch films. Nige, you're a Carpenter fan, right?
I'm an absolutely huge fan of Carpenter. As I said earlier, he is, for me, the master of horror. Like, he's done so many great films. I know, like, some of his more recent stuff, and he's more or less retired, really, from directing now. I think that's because studios just won't give him the money. I think he'd still be keen to do it. But for me... I don't think They Live is his best. I think the pacing of the film is quite weird. Like, certainly when, as you said, there's kind of this really long, lovely build-up, and then the reveal, and then it gets a bit lost, a bit muddled. When he joins, like, the Resistance properly, that bit seems a bit rushed. The Meg Foster's character's very odd. It's very jarring. It doesn't quite work that well. But and Piper, he's really good in this. I mean, he is not a conventional actor. You might struggle to kind of, I don't know, sort of feel anything for his character. It's almost like it's quite wooden. Let's be honest, it is quite wooden, but it really suits the film itself. Is kind of it's something quite different, and it's quite unconventional, which kind of works with this film because, as you say, there's a lot of things going on. It's more than sort of meets the eye. Did you want me to actually give my rating now as well?
Let's go for it.
So for me, as I said, I don't think it's his best film, but it is brilliant. I really enjoy it. It's an absolute cult classic. But for me, I'd probably say, because of the reasons I just mentioned, it'd only be a 7 out of 10 for me.
Nice. Yeah. I had a 7 as well. I enjoyed this film. I agree. Like I think like it does go a bit all over the place, and I think I agree with your points really. But a 7 out of 10, really enjoyable film. I'd watch it again.
Yeah, I wrote down my kind of summary was a really fun film, but it seems to be like a sequence of moments.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like it feels like this moment, then this moment, then this moment, and Nige and you have both said it already. The pacing, that reveal, like I always, my brain, I've come here to, eat bubblegum and kick ass kind of thing. Chew bubblegum and kick ass. I'm getting the quote wrong, but I will just rather try that again. when it comes to the bubblegum, no, but I thought that scene took place much later in the movie because it feels like such a later scene. Him going into a bank all armored up and stuff and just shooting people everywhere. But yeah, it's the pacing of it is a bit odd. So I just went for a 6.
Okay.
Oh wow. There you go. Piper's going to come for you, mate. I tell you, get you in a sleeper hold.
Yeah.
Well, guys, that is part 1 done of our Halloween special episode. So why don't you tune in tomorrow? That's right, tomorrow you are getting some more podcast Halloween edition in your ear holes and listen to us talk about From Dusk Till Dawn. Also, if you want to get in touch, why don't you email us on offradarpod@gmail.com. You can tweet us at offradarpodcast. All of that stuff is in the description below. Let us know what you think of this film, any of the films in our Halloween special episodes, or that we've done so far. And we'll speak to you tomorrow on Off Radar.